Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Customer Service Revolution podcast. My name is Dave Murray, and I am the senior consultant with the DeJulius Group, and I am thrilled and honored to have as my guest today, Juffre from ImageFIRST. Now, if you're not familiar with ImageFIRST, they are in the healthcare laundry industry. So they are a textile and industrial launderer. And they're in an industry that has a lot of big players, a lot of competition. And ImageFIRST has been able to grow and grow and grow over the years. Jay is an executive vice president with the organization, and he's really grown up in the industry. He's worked for ImageFIRST and in a previous position with Cintas, and he has grown up in the industry. And I mean, he has had just about every job you can in the industry, from working in the plant to sales, to service, to sales leadership, service leadership, regional leadership, and now an executive vice president. I've had the privilege of working with Jay since about 2014 on some of the great work that he's done with ImageFIRST. So Jay's been a client of the DeJulius Group. He's a graduate of our CXEA program, our CX Executive Academy program. And if you ever come to our Customer Service Revolution conference, you've probably met Jay there. He's there just about every year. So I'm thrilled to have Jay on as a guest today. We're going to talk about a couple of things that I think you'll find interesting. So first of all, one of the things that's going to come up in our conversation is how the pandemic actually proved the importance of your customer experience. Jay's going to explain how they found that out firsthand going through COVID. The other thing that's going to come up in our conversation is the difference between customer service and customer experience, and how focusing on the latter, customer experience, has really helped ImageFIRST grow and become a leader within their industry. We're also going to talk about the customer experience journey that they've created and they follow, and how they've been talking about it consistently for over 6 years now since it was originally created. And Jay's also going to touch a little bit on the importance of their associate experience cycle and how they've been using that, especially focusing on that coming out of COVID and rehiring and kind of getting back to normal as we are today, hopefully turning that corner. So I'm excited to have Jay on. He has so many great stories to tell, so many great metrics. So without further ado, let's talk with Jay. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to chat with you again. It's been a while. The last time you and I had a chance to really chat was at the Customer Service Revolution. We were back together in Cleveland towards the end of 2021. And we talked about some great things that you have going on at ImageFIRST, which I want to get into today. But I wanted to start with, if you could just kind of give me an overview of kind of the state of your industry, because it's a big industry, right? When you talk about you guys at ImageFIRST and Cintas and a lot of other players, what's the state of your industry right now, kind of emerging from COVID going into 2022 here?
Yeah, well, the industry's doing pretty well. Hospitality got hit really hard. Food and beverage got hit really hard. We're in medical, as you know. Cintas, obviously, industrial uniform, all things Cintas and Aramark and UniFirst and companies like that do. But overall, the industry's doing pretty well. We did some things during COVID that I think really helped us emerge. We did well in COVID. And I think a lot of our things we did as far as our culture, as far as our relationships with our customers really, really helped. We went into COVID and nobody knew what was going on. And I think we doubled down on our culture. We doubled down on our service strategy. We doubled down on our associate, that's what we call our employees, our associate engagement. And it really, really paid dividends. Our goals, we only had 3 goals. Our goals was to, number one, keep everybody safe, to keep everybody employed, and to take great care of our customers. And that was, sort of our guiding principles. I think how companies in our industry responded to COVID, led to whether they navigated successfully or not. I mean, there were some segments of the business that were going to do poorly regardless. Like I said, food and beverage, we're not into that. Hospitality, we're not into that. But we're really pleased with how we came out of it. I think that everybody in the industry is cautiously optimistic that we're getting on the other side of this thing and things are slowly getting back to normal. And knock on wood, hopefully that continues.
Excellent. Now, before we get into a couple of the questions I wanted to ask you today, I did want to set the stage for our audience of what ImageFIRST was doing, what your experience was like before COVID, because you and I started working together, I think it was towards the end of 2014, and created some great tools. You and your team did an amazing job of rolling out and implementing and making sure that your teams were following the tools that were created. And quite honestly, you saw some amazing results. I know that before COVID, you had a client retention rate of over 98%. I know that you were able to lower your associate turnover to around the mid 30%, which when you talk about plants and some of that hourly rate, that's almost unheard of as far as those numbers. So you really got some great results prior to COVID, and then obviously COVID hit. But I just was wondering if you could tell me, do you feel as though before COVID that you really kind of hit your stride? Were you where you wanted to be, or were you still trying to improve some of those numbers?
Well, both. I think that when you and I first started working together, I think we first met John the year before you and I started working together more closely, that we had a good customer service strategy. We wanted to bring the customer engagement into it and have a great service strategy. We had a good approach to associate engagement. We wanted to get great at that. We had a very good culture. We wanted to see how we could enhance it. And I remember when you and I were first talking, it wasn't going to happen overnight. It was more of a journey. And each month that goes by, every year that goes by, you're adding another piece to the puzzle. To your point, I was really pleased with our results. I mean, our NPS was in the 80s, and we had passed companies like Apple and Chick-fil-A and Southwest Airlines, and these companies we had really looked up to, and we had sort of jumped just ahead of them. And we're really pleased with that. Our associate turnover, to your point, for the industry we're in, was world class. I mean, we had plants in Los Angeles and New Jersey and Chicago that were, single, low double digit turnover in really, really competitive job markets. And we're excited about that. As far as our customer retention, yeah, through the roof. Places go out of business. Things happen with mergers and acquisitions, especially in the medical world. But we were keeping, 97, 98% of our customer base. So we felt really good about where we were. We're building on it. COVID hits, and I think it sort of, in a way, it showed we were on the right path, because part of COVID meant scaling back some of those customer experience elements, scaling back some of those associate experience elements. So when you look at where the lockdowns were, or where we had trouble sort of even meeting with some of our contacts, I think our customer service stayed really strong because we came through every delivery. But I think our customer experience, intentionally, and for all the right reasons of keeping people safe, we had to scale it back. Same thing with our associates. Daily huddles, we had to stop doing those. Individual small group meetings, we call them Be Remarkable meetings. We had to scale those back. So we did, to your point, we saw a little bit of an erosion in our NPS, although it's still very, very good. We saw a little bit of erosion in our customer retention, although it's still, by anyone's standards, great. And our turnover went up, and especially on those frontline associates. And I think prior to COVID, we made such an effort to make sure that our team was focused on customer experience and doing all those little things that you and I built together. And same thing on the HR or the associate side, doing all those little things to make sure we're connecting with our associates every day. It's tough to connect with people when you got to stay 6 or 10 feet apart. And when they have to stay 6 to 10 feet away from each other in the plant, and you can't meet one-on-one. Things like goodwills with our customers, those face-to-face meetings, as we all know, became virtual. And you can't do, it's much, we're virtual right now, Dave. I'd much rather see you in person, in Cleveland or anywhere, as opposed to trying to connect. You can still connect, but it's not the same, as we know.
Right. And you touch on COVID and lockdowns, and one of the things that you shared with me in one of our previous conversations that I found so interesting that I wanted you to share with our audience was how the pandemic almost proved the importance of CX, right? That you could gauge how effective your CX was in markets based on their level of COVID lockdowns and what was happening in particular markets. And where it wasn't as locked down and you were still able to follow your customer experience cycle a little more to a T, as opposed to what was happening in markets where it was a little more locked down, that there was a noticeable difference in some of your NPS scores. Could you talk about that a little bit, Jay?
Yeah, I think you could definitely look at objective things like NPS dropping where we couldn't engage with the client, like turnover going up where we couldn't engage with the associate. No question. But you look at subjective things too, the frustration of our team that had been trained to act a certain way when it came to relating with customers, relating with contacts, just the effect it had on them. You mean we can't do this anymore? No, we can't do that because the state rules say you can't, or, you can't, this is the way you need to approach the situation. We had customers that we had great relationships with because, as you know, we go in once a week or twice a week with linen deliveries and scrub deliveries and gown deliveries. And we take the soil away and we leave clean stuff and we do all those little things. Customers have basically said, listen, this is the way you have to interact with us and our staff and our patients. And it became very regimented, very, a lot of protocols. And again, you said it, depending on the geography of the state, definitely restricted what we could do. And you see that in NPS, you see that in call-ins, you see that in a lot of objective and also very subjective ways. It's something where our customer advocate can't physically, and that's who delivers the linen, can't physically meet with someone and have that conversation. You can't even do the basics, let alone things that are above and beyond or things that add to the overall experience that we have with that particular interaction. So yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to say blue state, red state, or this city had a bigger lockdown in this city, but you could look at the map and know where people were struggling and to an extent why they were struggling. And again, it was really interesting to watch. And as we come out of it, you see things going the other way. That's something, there is a good news to this story. As we come out of COVID, you see retention rates go up. You see NPS go up. You see us able to get back to basics in terms of retraining people and things of that nature. And that's really where our focus is now, sort of getting back to basics. I think the companies that, and you and John have talked about it, the companies that reconnect with their associates and their customers the quickest are going to win. And it may be a little bit different, but it's something where it's this new paradigm of race to get back to where you were if you were great, or an opportunity to improve things if you were okay prior to the pandemic.
Jay, you touched on something that I want to go a little deeper on. And it's something that really helps ImageFIRST stand out, not only in your industry, but across industries. When you brought up the term customer advocate, and I think it's really worth mentioning that you don't have delivery drivers, right? Most organizations in your industry have delivery drivers that are going to, in your case, the health systems, the offices, and making the delivery. You made a decision a long time ago, back when prior to we started working together, that you weren't going to hire delivery drivers, you were going to hire customer advocates. And their job description is a little different than a delivery driver. Yes, they're delivering, but they're also doing so much more. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because it really struck me when you said that you were hearing from your associates that they were frustrated that they couldn't do what they would normally do. They couldn't execute that customer experience that they would normally execute. And to me, that just mentions or screams rather that that's implementation well done. They saw the value in delivering that and were frustrated that they could not deliver that experience.
Yeah, I think that's something that I think is really important. How people view what they do, but more importantly, why they do it, can affect how they do it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
What do they do? Technically, yeah, they drive a truck and pick up soiled linen and deliver clean linen. And that doesn't get too many people excited. And the industry, to your point, that's the way it is. Okay, we hire truck drivers, we hire delivery drivers. We try to make them good people when they go in and respectful and all that stuff and hit the customer service marks. And I think our evolution, and you're right, it was a couple of years before we first engaged the Julius Group, we had this epiphany that we wanted these folks to really embrace why they do what they do. If they don't come through, it could mean life or death. And not to make it overly dramatic, but generally what we're delivering is either going to help a patient or help the person taking care of the patient. And therefore, you are really the person that by doing a great job, you can let the staff, let the doctors, let the nurses focus on the patient, focus on what's important. So it's important you go in and you're that customer advocate. You're managing the linens for them so they don't have to worry about that stuff. They can focus on the more important stuff. And that was a real paradigm shift for our customer advocates. So naturally, there was a lot of training there. We brought in the customer experience part. We brought in the service vision and the service strategy and all that stuff and sprinkled everything together. But when you have a group of people that for 5, 7, 8 years have been told you're the customer advocate, it's a cultural shock for them to try and go back to just being a delivery guy or just being the guy that's good at customer service. And so again, a lot of this reinforced that we are really and have been on the right path for a while. And the neat thing is to see folks embrace it again as we come out of COVID, embrace getting back to basics if they were here before, or if they were hired during COVID to say, wow, what a great gig. I get to do this too. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting how someone's title and getting them focused on the why as opposed to the what can really impact how they do stuff. And it was a good frustration. It was good to hear people frustrated they couldn't do the things they normally do. And we say, hey, we understand, stick with it best you can. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to get right back to what we were doing.
I have a follow-up question on that because I've heard you say before that there are good companies in your industry. There are companies that do a nice job, that provide good customer service. But one of the things that really separates ImageFIRST is that you're focused on customer experience, the entire experience you're delivering. So I'm just curious, in your opinion, how you define the difference. And one of the things you just brought up that made me think of it is your team understands the why. It's not just the what. Is that the big difference maker, or are there other things that you're focused on that get you from service to experience?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think it's who you compare yourself to, right? So the industry, yeah, a lot of very good companies in the industry, no question. They try to be very good at customer service, and a lot of them are very good at customer service. I think when you and I and the Julius Group and our team first looked at this thing, we said, who do we want to be compared to? Who do we want to be compared to? And that's where we looked at the companies that were great. And the companies that are great, as you know, they blend customer service and customer experience so flawlessly, you don't even know what's going on. And that's the difference between a very nice Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton. That's the difference between KFC and Chick-fil-A. And you go down the list. So I think when we looked at it, we looked at our industry, and me personally, having spent my whole career in the industry, I'm only worked for a couple of companies, but I worked for 2 very good companies, ImageFIRST and my previous company. I really, frankly, I wanted nothing to do with the industry. I was sort of tired of the industry. And I said, so what are people doing outside the industry? And I think there's a certain look and feel that delivery drivers in our industry have. There's an approach they have if they're good at it. And good wasn't good enough for ImageFIRST. We said we have to sprinkle in the customer experience. We're very thankful to the Julius Group. You guys gave us the roadmap. And it really has helped us tremendously to bring those elements in. And like we've been talking about, I see the effect of not having a customer experience. We became a very good, very reliable customer service company during COVID. And to me, that's good. And that's not good enough, right? You have to give them elements. And I think getting everyone in our industry can tell you what they do. I think, to your point, very few companies can tell you why they do it sincerely and use, how to get done the job at hand, base it on the why. Don't base it on the what. And I think that sounds very nuanced, but it does make a difference, Dave. It's a study to observe that. And I think it does make a difference. We try to get every single associate in the company, from production associates to the customer advocates to the leadership team, to the sales team, to the execs, focused on why they come to work. It gets into some of the other elements that you can't just, if you don't have the culture, then all the customer experience training in the world isn't going to get you there. So we really start with getting our people aligned with why we're doing what we're doing. And there's the old adage, and we've talked about it before, that old adage where the customer is never going to be happier than the person taking care of them. So you got to take a step back and say, how do my folks feel about what they're doing? Well, it's not too sexy. How do they feel about why they're doing it? Well, that's sort of cool. Well, let's get them aligned around why they're doing it as opposed to what they're doing.
Becoming the brand customers can't live without is a team effort. Want to get everyone on board and bought into becoming a world-class brand? Consider bringing John in live or virtually for a keynote or workshop. Email Claudia@thedejuliusgroup.com for more information.
Yeah, you bring up culture, and you mentioned this a little earlier in our conversation, that not only did you see some of your NPS scores, your external customer satisfaction scores decline a little bit during COVID, but you also saw your turnover numbers start to creep up during COVID as well. And you mentioned that during COVID, it was just harder to focus on that associate experience cycle that you had created, right? It was harder to do things like those huddles and maybe recognize and reward and get teams together and do some of that team building. So I'm just curious, how do you think you still made it through as well as you did, right? So what did you focus on when you had to replace some of those things that had gotten your culture to a great place? So how did you at least try and maintain that momentum? And then how do you see yourself emerging now? Are you back to normal? Are you getting back to normal? How would you assess that?
I think, first of all, we're getting back to normal. I think there's still, we're slowly emerging from this. It's March 15th. It's almost 2 years to the day since this whole thing started.
Right.
And it feels like we're on the other side of this thing finally, but who knows? So we're getting back to normal. I think we did the best we could, Dave. I think our number one goal is associates taking pride in achieving their best. That's what we want to do. We want to create an environment where associates love coming to work. The only way you can do that is to give them feedback and to get feedback and to build trust. And due to the circumstances, that was very tough to do. We did the best we could. I mean, the exec team did a good job of sending out videos. We had newsletters. We communicated the best we could. Walks around the plant were very different. I love walking around the plant whenever I go to a location. I know our leadership team does as well, locally and the national team. But when you have to stay 6 to 10 feet away from someone and sort of wave to them through a mask, it's really, really difficult. So I think we did the best we could. I think a lot of companies did the best they could. I think for me, it's going forward, and we've had talks about, we're starting to do the huddles again, doing them safely. We're starting to do the group meetings, doing them safely. We're doing the elements of the associate experience cycle. We're looking down at what we got away from and saying, how can we bring this stuff back as quickly as possible? The good thing is the roadmap's there. So we know what we took out of the associate experience cycle, and we know what we have to get back into it. It's always the question, can we do this safely? Can we do this effectively? Is everybody trained to do it the right way? And then you start from there. If people know what to do, then hey, let's just bring this back. If people don't know what to do, then that's when it starts over. Okay, let's train people on how to run an effective huddle. Let's train people on how to do this element of the associate experience cycle. So we, as recent as yesterday, we were talking about, okay, here's some basic fundamental stuff. Do we need to train to it, or we just need to put it back in place? And you almost, unfortunately, have to do that with every element of the customer experience journey that you got away from, and every element of the associate experience cycle that you got away from, and take them one at a time. The nice thing is some stuff is easier to implement than some other stuff. So there is some training that's involved with some things, but a lot of things, hey guys, remember this? Yeah, we're going to start doing it again. Everybody's like, okay, great. That's awesome. Even selection gets hard too. I mean, a big part of, as you know, building a team and maintaining that culture is selection. It's difficult. A lot of interviews were done on Zoom. A lot of interviews were done over the phone. It's a big difference, just like the customer action, when you're sitting down trying to decide whether this person should be on your team, and that person is trying to decide whether they want to be on your team. If you can't sit down in an office, or at a table 5 feet from each other and just have a nice conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. You just brought up reinforcing that customer experience cycle. And I remember like it was yesterday, it was November of 2016. We got a team of your fellow associates together in Orlando, and we created the ImageFIRST customer experience cycle. And you mentioned before we started our chat today, and I think as recently as last week, you were out there doing a session talking about a particular stage of that cycle, the delivery stage of that cycle. And so here we are 6 years later, where you're literally talking about that and making sure that it's refreshed and people understand it. So I think one of the things that speaks to the success that you have had, Jay, and ImageFIRST has had in becoming a successful customer experience organization is your commitment to reinforce and talk about and make it part of your culture. Here you are talking about those things 6 years later. So how often are you able to do that? How often are you able to get these in front of your teams? And how well do you think your managers, your leaders are kind of coaching and talking about it within their everyday communications with their teams?
Yeah, well, there's different audiences, right? So if you want to get tactical, we're growing like crazy, which is great, but you've got a lot of new service leaders in, new route analysts, which is also service leader positions. You get service managers, route analysts. You got new customer advocates. So our cadence is pretty simple. I mean, once a month, we have a meeting for all the new service managers who've been with the company less than 18 months. And they meet and we go through training. Same thing with all the new route analysts. Route analysts are the ones that check in the CAs every day. They got a huge influence on what the CA is thinking, training, things of that nature. So, 1 week it's the new service leaders. Another week it's the route analysts. Then you get all the route analysts together on another week. You get all the service leaders together on another week. And I just recently recorded, the customer advocate training. We do monthly training that they watch. It's 20 minutes, half hour of just reinforcing it. To your point, there was an element this month that focused on a customer service aspect of what we do. And there was an element that came right out of the customer experience cycle, or as we call it, the customer experience journey, on deliveries and the things you avoid, the standards at every delivery, and some ideas to go above and beyond. And I think, for customer advocates been around for a while and sort of know it, it's reinforcing what they did, prior to COVID or what they've tried to do coming out of COVID. And for maybe newer customer advocates that had it during their onboarding, it's reinforcing that. It's the first time they've heard it since their onboarding. So I think we try and just keep the message going. And I think it's important to get feedback from the field on what they need, what they think they need. So the idea is let's say we have 300-400 customer advocates out there running around every day across the country. That's a lot of people. So it's like, hey, what does the field need now? And same thing with the service leaders. What do the service leaders need now? And so I think it's staying close to the field and knowing where we might be slipping a little bit. We know we intentionally altered the delivery during COVID. So the more we can do to get back to basics on that right now is huge. Thousands and thousands of deliveries every day. If they're all the same and they're done exactly the same way and everybody's doing the standards, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, that's amazing. The amount of effort that you have put into making this a very normal part of day-to-day life within the organization, right? It's not an annual refresher. It's not quarterly. It is at least monthly, where your team members are talking about this. They're sharing ideas. They're focused on it. And it's a great testament to where you are today, that focus, that discipline works, and it works really well.
Yeah. And that's nationally. I mean, locally, I want to give our local teams a lot of credit because they're checking in the customer advocates every day. They're having local meeting. They're having local training. We have all those tools at their disposal that they can use to, where are the holes locally, right? I can look nationally and say, here's what I think we need to focus on nationally, but really encourage our local leadership teams to look at where the holes in the customer experience journey or the associate experience cycle are locally, and let's work together to fill those holes. So I think there's a yin and yang thing going on there where we're doing all we can as a company, but also in our local markets, they're doing things locally to make sure that they're on point.
Yeah. So Jay, I have one last question for you, and it's kind of a big question maybe. You've done so much when it comes to the experience that you're delivering, both externally with your clients and what your customer advocates are out there doing every day when they're engaging with them. And also you've done so much work on your associate experience journey as well, your internal customers. So I'm just curious, of all the work that you have done, all the implementation, all the great results you have seen, does anything stand out to you, something that you're most proud of as far as the results that you've attained at ImageFIRST?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is our service vision, and you were involved with that, right? We have to remember that we had blown the budget. It's the end of the year, but we wanted to have a service vision workshop, right? So we're in the basement of some hotel up in Pennsylvania, and we brought in the execs, we brought in the sales team, we brought in HR, we brought in obviously service folks, we brought in a lot of people from around the country. And the service vision, which for us is create a positive moment with every interaction. And that's not only, we wanted it universal, that's not only how we interact with our customers, but it's also how we interact with everybody. I think the service vision has made us a better company, but it's made us better people too. And you know how deep the service vision goes, but I am so proud that the service vision is now part of our operating principles, part of our core of how we do things. But I think that has done so much to pay it forward, just as from a humanitarian standpoint, right? The idea of having everybody focused. I mean, we've got thousands of people who work for our company, and to have everybody focused on creating a positive moment with every interaction, and to have people say that's not only made me a better customer advocate, or that's only made me a better service manager, but that's made me a better person. That's made me a better father, a better wife, a better, better son, better daughter, better parent. I think that's really special. And when it got promoted to the operating principles, it's now right on our donut there, our service vision. That made me really proud because everybody, you were in the room, we came in, it was like, we also want the Declaration of Independence because it's up by Philly, right? And we just all got in a room and we talked through it, and we wanted a couple things. We wanted it to be very impactful, and we wanted it to be universal, so it wasn't just related to customers. And I think it has positively affected the relationship we have with our associates. I think it's positively affected the relationship we have with each other. It's obviously positively affected the impact we have with our customers. But I'd say my proudest thing is how much that's improved not only our company, but our community and the people who have had the opportunity to work for us or work for us now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And as you're saying that, Jay, you're making me think back to a pretty proud moment that I had over that 2-day workshop as well. I remember we finished up on day 2. A bunch of us hopped into a van. We were heading to the airport. You asked one of the attendees, I can't remember who, but you asked one of the attendees, hey, what did you think of the workshop? And his response was, it was life-changing. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's pretty impactful. And I was thrilled to be a part of that. And, you're absolutely right. He was right. It is life-changing. It changed your organization, how you operate, your focus as an organization, and it's created just amazing, amazing results.
Yeah, it's been a team lift. Can't thank you guys enough. I'm so thankful for the partnership, the friendship. I'm very excited about all your success. The podcast is really neat to listen to. And so thanks for all you guys did, because it was great to have you as a partner in this, because I think you guys came along at exactly the right time and have really helped our team take it to another level. And we're very thankful for that.
Well, we're appreciative that we were able to be a part of the success that you all have achieved. And again, Jay Juffre from ImageFIRST, thank you so much for being our guest on the Customer Service Revolution podcast today. It's always great to hear from you and hear the great things you have going on. Every time we talk, you always have another great story to tell, another great metric that you've achieved. And so it's always great to catch up.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the conversation. Always great to talk to you as well. And you be safe, and look forward to seeing you soon and probably talking to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time today, Jay.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I'm Denise Thompson, managing partner of the DeJulius Group, and I invite you to send us your questions, post a review, and let us know what you liked and want to hear more of. We're happy that you're part of the Customer Service Revolution and encourage you to subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. You'll find us on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast station.